According to the latest report, newly inaugurated Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi will meet with U.S. sitting President Donald Trump very soon during Trump's planned visit. This will be the opportunity for her to explain the plans for bolstering national defense. Now, this is an unusual moment that we are seeing the nation of Japan elected the first female prime minister. How about the domestic economy and also the trade relationship? For Japan at this moment, it is rather concerning for the citizens to understand the current economic situation and also about the future. And what about the relationship between US and Japan at this moment? And in this episode, we are going to answer all the questions. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce our great and speaker, who is a Professor Sayuri Shirai. Professor Shirai is a professor of economics at Keio University in Tokyo, and she's an Asian Development Bank Institute fellow and a former member of the board of the Bank of Japan. Well, Professor Shirai, and welcome to The Missing Piece.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, Professor Shirai, it's such an honor to have you on the show. Now, initially when I discovered you, because this amazing article that you wrote, which is entitled, Can Sanae Takaichi Make Everyday Life in Japan Feel Affordable Again? Now, right now, we're seeing this newly elected prime minister is taking bold steps towards the domestic economy. Help us with better understanding why it's so crucial for her to tackle the economy in Japan, and how would you describe the economic situation in the nation right now? Your thoughts?
Yes. So for a very long time, Japan was having a very low inflation and then very high value yen and very stagnant economies, very, very long time. We still have a stagnant economy, but since 2022, especially when yen started to depreciate significantly against US dollar and any other currency, partly because of the growing interest rate differential, like a Federal Reserve was started to actively increase the interest rate. So yen for the first time depreciated very significantly after 20-30 years. And then this, together with some other increase in commodity prices, for the first time for many years, we started to experience inflation. So we used to have a deflation for long, right? Mild deflation, negative, price growth. But now, since 2022, we are having inflation and beyond 2% Bank of Japan's target. And then right now, we still have a very high inflation, around 2.7%. But more than 70% of this inflation come from food, okay? And then most of our foods are imported. So this is very clearly related with yen's depreciation. So that's why people are saying, they are suffering because they have to purchase, food every day at the supermarket. It's very high. So, since 2022, Japan's price increased by around 11%, but food price is more than 20%. So it's very clearly this is all about food prices. Okay, so therefore people's income are not catching up. So people try to save and try to spend less money for the food. So it's really, the household budget is tightening. So that's why people are very unhappy. So every time there's opinion survey, the first thing the Japanese public want the governments to do is, price, keeping measures, right? So that's why people expecting the Takaichi-san will do something different this time.
Well, Professor, I want to go back to the article that, again, in the article, this is something that you wrote, and I quote, she proposed a new income tax-based measure called refundable tax credit, which is the mechanism allow household with little or no tax liability to receive cash payment, while household with income below a certain threshold receive tax credit. We know that today, when we talk about the tax credit system, for example, in the US, it's rather complicated. And of course, it's even more intricate when we look at other nations. But in Japan, as you mentioned in the article, this nation is undergoing this tremendous economic transformation. But for her to tackle and even to bring up this what we called refundable tax credit. So number one, how should we understand the effectiveness of the system?
Yes.
And also, why do you think this can be one of the tangible solutions for Japanese household to understand the economic deadlock? Your thoughts?
Yes. So to have a U.S. style, this refundable tax credit, which means, people who are paying taxes like me, certain amount, we don't need to pay tax, right? So that is very clear, okay? So she want to create something new tax credit. It will be not so big, but small, but we get some exemption. But there are always people whose income is so low, so that, they don't need, they are not able to get full tax credit. Or some people are not even paying, any taxes. So they are not be able to have a benefit from this kind of system. So together with sort of a payment for the people who do not have a full credit or do not get any tax credit, so the government will provide sort of same level of payments to the everybody. However, as I said in my article, this is not implementable at this stage, because to do that, the government has to have a detailed information, right? Who is paying how much, and how much tax credit people have access to, who are not paying, and then what about pensioners? So you need database. But unfortunately, Japan is not digitalized. It's quite behind. So all this tax system, central government tax system, local government payment system, social security, pension, asset, data are not linked. So technically, it's not possible to implement. So when so why she introduced this idea? Because in the past, the prime minister, because always they needed to something to support for the public to cope with this inflation. So they provided very tiny money, like $100 only once in all, so very tiny amount, right? And then for the people whose income are below certain level, okay? And then people are not really appreciating. It's just so tiny amount, and it's tax credit, as we don't really feel, right? I mean, it's very complicated. So that's why Takaichi-san brought this new idea. But as I said, technically under Japanese system where this data is not linked, it's not technically possible. So that's why she says she's going to consider, but it doesn't mean she can introduce this year or next year. And then I don't know exactly how she can do it, because it's highly, our economy is not digitalized, so it's not clear. But she's bringing some new ideas. So people think, okay, something new is coming. But to me, as I said in my article, most important inflation issue for us is food, right? So the easiest way is to lower consumption tax. Consumption tax applies to food. And then Takaichi also mentioned that in May this year, possibly maybe, for a while, lower this consumption tax on food, okay? But then internally, in this ruling party, because they are worried about our huge public debt, so and then also consumption tax is closely related to social security benefit payment, and also it's related to directly related to central government and local government revenue. So some local government are very unhappy because they might lose tax revenue. So there's a lot of criticism inside. So that's why she kind of gave up. So when there was this leaders election, she didn't really emphasize it. Okay. However, what is surprising is that because LDP doesn't have enough votes, so they had a deal with a very small opposition party called Ishin no Kai. It's a small party. And then they had an agreement about sort of a potential policy they should introduce. And there it clearly said for 2 years, abandon this consumption tax rate applies to food. But from yesterday, she's also already saying it's not a priority. But if going back to this tax credit system, if it's not implementable today or tomorrow or next year, and what she's saying as a price keeping measure is providing subsidy to hospital which has a deficit, and to the caretakers, and providing subsidy to the SME local government, or gasoline transitory tax removal. But it doesn't; those things do not really benefit all consumer, right? So to me, biggest issue about inflation is food, but she is trying to move away from that. So I don't really know. Well, in the end, people really appreciate what she's going to do.
Professor Shirai, as we talk about the domestic economic situation, and you brought up a very good point, I want to continue our conversation regarding one of the severe issues that Japan is facing right now. Again, not only Japan, but from this global perspective, is the labor shortage. And we know that today, when we talk about economy, we talk about the projection of the economy, the trade relationship, labor market is facing more backlash than ever. So in the article, you mentioned, and specifically regarding the low productivity growth and limited progress in digital transformation. Talk to us a little bit more about the labor shortage in Japan today, and how do you think a brand new prime minister it's going to find solutions? So in other words, how is the Prime Minister Takaichi is going to tackle this issue, help younger generation to find jobs, and also we're looking at the aging population growth. Your thoughts?
Yes, very good question. So we have a most serious labor shortage in the world. Right? Because already we have a declining population since like 20 years ago, and the labor force is already shrinking. And only at this moment we have a female housewife who takes some part-time jobs, and the elderly people, pensioners, get some part-time job. But it's getting very serious now. So how serious? If you just go to Japan and just go to the regular cafe, there is always announcements that we need somebody, okay? And they try to pay, some money, but the money is not important because people are not there. So the people do not go. So that how serious it is. It's getting very serious, okay? And especially in hospital, like nurses, elderly care, because the wages are not very high and very labor productive, and very, very severe labor shortage. Who is going to take care of elderly people? And also construction sector, and also like retail shops, severe labor shortage. So no question for many times, but it's getting so serious because a lot of people are getting above 75-year-olds. So we have to do something. So then we have two choices, right? If we have a serious labor shortage, one is to accept more, foreign labor force on a more permanent basis. Because at this moment, Japan is not willing to accept a lot of foreigners in a permanent basis. There are a lot of restrictions. So one is to have a proper immigration policy. Another one, if the Japanese people do not want to have a lot of foreign workers, the only option is to digitalize it, right? Digitalize everything. And then we can increase labor productivity. However, as I mentioned about the tax credit system, even this such kind of important tax data, security data, is not linked. So when the government want to do some good like a research and development subsidy or some special subsidy for the SME, but the data is not linked, so it's not very effective, never effective. So first thing they have to do is they have to, have a digitalized government, e-government. But, they are talking about it for many years, and my number system is there, but it's not utilized. Somehow it's remain inefficient. Still we use paper. We still use like stamp traditional base. Almost nothing changed. It's very difficult to explain, but this economy is not digitalized. So every time we do something, we go to the local government, everything's paper, and it takes, a lot of time. So this has to be changed, and not only for the labor shortage and for the government to function well, but also to have an effective fiscal policy. And then also, once government become efficient and digitalized, it's linked to everything, right? For example, if I'm a small medium enterprise CEO, I want to apply for some subsidy. Right now, everything's on the paper. So I talk with the SME, but they say it's not so easy to understand. But if digitalized, maybe government can check by AI, okay, this person may be eligible, why don't you apply? So this kind of more proactive policy is important, but with a very limited improvement of digitalization, everything is very inefficient. And then so I talked to the small, medium enterprises, and why don't you use more AI? They say simply no engineers. So this is the next problem. So we have a labor shortage, but AI, like engineers, data science engineers are extremely, we don't have enough people, okay, for many years. It's because of that, the company cannot hire. So I was very surprised, not only Takaichi-san, but four other candidates which ran for this leadership election, nobody mentioned that, they have to they have to, give more incentive so that young people choose more science-based field, rather than social science. And then government try to provide some tuition subsidy to all sectors. I came back from Malaysia, but I hear Malaysia, they try to also, put more, emphasis on science and technology, but Japan doesn't. And why don't give more tuition fee, some support for the people who are willing to take such kind of AI and science, right? So that's why we haven't really find a way to increase the number of AI engineers, even in Japan, not to mention from foreigners. Nobody mentioned, until today, she never mentioned. So if she want to increase the labor productivity, exactly how she's going to do. For many years, the Prime Minister say, okay, we have to increase wage, minimum wage, but how can you do it without labor productivity? And then they haven't really come up with clear solution. And it was very unfortunate that she and LDP people so far have never mentioned about how to cope with this serious labor shortage in AI and science area.
Professor Shirai, I know you're very busy. I have two more questions, so stay with me. Let's talk about the international talents. As you mentioned before, every single country today is attracting international talents, not only for domestic productivity, but also for rebranding the international images. Now, as soon as Prime Minister Takaichi was inaugurated, she appointed someone to be in charge of what we call the immigration system, as long as the offering this new visa policy. But at this moment, people are very concerned about this, I dare to use the word hawkish immigration policy towards international talent. Again, this is very crucial for Japan, to bring in more international talented people to contribute and help. So, Professor Shirai, from your perspective, how do we understand the newly appointed person to be in charge of the immigration policy, and how do you think that's gonna either be advantageous or gonna be a drawback for Japan? Your thoughts?
Yes. So, every country, especially advanced countries, you see some nationalistic, sentiment everywhere in Europe and US. And in Japan, since 2022, yen become extremely cheap and super cheap right now. So we have a flood of foreigners and sort of the biggest number in history. So we see so many foreigners everywhere, okay? For them, it's so cheap because it's so cheap. Everything's so cheap. For us, everything expensive. But for them, it's so cheap. So many foreigners here. Now, I never see it, but I hear from some people that, some of the of foreigners, they just drink and they stay on the road and it's kind of behaving badly. And some people, they go to the hospital, but they don't pay and disappear. There are, I think, we shouldn't single out foreigners. This may happen to the Japanese, but, it tends to be, it kind of highlighted. So because so many foreigners right now, and maybe some foreigners do not really behave have a good manners. So some people have feeling bad. In addition to that, we are not really, economy is not doing well. Wage do not catch up with inflation, right? But a lot of things are now very expensive. So for example, if young people, married couple, if they want to buy an apartment, okay, extremely expensive. Okay, it's before only men can afford it. Now the married couple have to work together, but it's extremely expensive. And why? Because we have a declining population. There is no demand, no strong demand for housing, but the housing price is expensive. Of course, it's partly because of this yen's depreciation. A lot of construction materials are expensive. And we have a shortage of people, so that's natural. But I hear that some foreigners, some Asian rich people, or maybe from certain countries, and they are buying a lot of real estate very easily. So even though there is limited demand domestically, but the prices are so high, it's not affordable level. So that also people started to feel a bit uncomfortable. As a result, in July, we had upper house elections, okay? LDP didn't do well. And then there's a new party, we call it Sanseto. It's a conservative party, but they really say, we are like Japan First Party, okay? So they started to say, okay, so we are going to do some anti-foreign measures, and they got popular. So I think Takaichi-san and this ruling party pay attention to this development, and okay, so some Japanese people, started to be a bit nationalistic. So I mean, she's inherently very nationalistic person, but they emphasize that. So all these five candidates, when there's a leadership election, everybody mentioned that they have to introduce some kind of control or and so on. So this female minister was selected. Not really to promote more eligible workers. I hardly hear any discussion from them that we need talented people, and then Japan is somewhat behind in terms of technology, so we need really to invite a lot of talented people from the world, but I don't hear anything like that. So the purpose is not really to encourage more foreign workers, and probably give some protection as well, and then some measures. Rather, it's more try to cope with couple of crime related to foreign workers and some misbehavior. It's more related to that, I think.
Well, Professor Shirai, I got to ask you the last question before we wrap up. As we mentioned before, that Prime Minister Takaichi is set to meet sitting U.S. President Donald Trump very soon, and this is going to be the first meeting for her. I mean, after becoming the brand new prime minister. Now, from this economic standpoint, everyone is very concerned about bolstering the national defense, etc. But again, domestic economy top the agenda. So briefly, from your perspective, what are the major priorities do you think that it's going to be crucial and possible for Prime Minister Takaichi to meet with the Donald Trump? So I want to hear your final thoughts.
So, LDP itself is by nature quite a conservative people, and they always put U.S.-Japan, this alliance, sort of military alliance, as a first priority. And then she's a big fan of former Prime Minister, Abe, and she believed his spirit. So she tried to say the same phrase. Okay, so strengthen Japan, and etc. So strengthen partly by increasing defense. So Mr. Trump's administration is saying to us, like they say exactly same thing to NATO and Europe. they want Japan to increase the defense budget. Because traditionally we spend only 1% of GDP, and then a couple of years ago, the prime minister decided to increase it towards 2%. About 2 years later, okay. Now 2% is still low, but we try to do maximum we can do because our government debt is 200. Like 30-40%, so huge, right? So we also have to send money for the public. So there was a plan by previous prime ministers, so they will try to increase to 2% in 2 years now. That Prime Minister Takaichi, yesterday she mentioned she want to advance that pace, and she want to achieve more than 2% next year. Okay, and so probably she want to say that to Mr. Trump, and I don't know whether Mr. Trump say that is now. We have to increase more, but even increasing right now it's 1.5% of GDP, and increasing to about 2%. And then, she have to pay all this, deficit-making hospital, etc. So it will be expansionary. So she said she is pursuing responsible fiscal expansionary policy, and that means in the long run she pay attention to the fiscal consolidation. But how is she going to pay all is not clear. But she definitely want to increase our defense to make our defensive power, strengthen our defensive power is clear. She hardly mentioned about Asia because right now, of course, U.S. is very important. But U.S. In terms of economically, U.S. GDP account for 1/4 of global GDP, and there is Asia. It is growing, and then many of Asian countries no longer depend much on the U.S. They are middle income and then getting richer, and they're so integrated, right? So of course, U.S. is important, but I think we also have to pay attention to the fact that Asia itself is growing. It's not necessarily depending on US. So we also have to pay attention because our economy is so also closely linked to the Asia, and many Japanese companies there. So, but she hardly mentioned about that. So, I think she needs to balance it. But number one, how she's going to increase our defense under this tight budget. And number two, how she's going to cope with this Asia and the rest of U.S. growing dynamics. So far, I don't hear much about opinion from LDP people.
Well, again, it's rather exciting to have the first female prime minister for the nation of Japan, and we don't know whether Prime Minister Takaichi is going to successfully tackle the economy issue and also the international policies, but we know this is going to be a groundbreaking news and groundbreaking journey for the entire nation of Japan. Well, ladies and gentlemen, such an honor to speak to Professor Sayuri Shirai. Again, Professor Shirai, it's a professor of economics at Keio University in Tokyo. She's an Asian Development Bank Institute Fellow and a former member of the board of the Bank of Japan. Well, Professor Shirai, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. We'd love to have you back on the show as we continue to pay attention to the matters in the nation of Japan. So thank you so much for doing this.